Yo, what is good, everybody? I'm your boy Jadiro, and this is my review of the Season 9 PTR of the Herodic nerfs. And specifically today, we're going to be talking about those Nightmare Escalation dungeons. And I'd also like to offer up some Nightmare Dungeon solutions going forward for Diablo 4. But how I like to do it is I like to jump straight into the escalation here, and I like to talk through as I play the game because I like the experience. Now, first thing I want to talk about here in the Escalating Nightmare Dungeons are the good things. The good thing is, if this is the way they expect us to level up in Season 9, then I think they hit it right on the head there. I think this is an excellent way to level up. I definitely think it's enjoyable through the leveling experience. Albeit, you won't have this level of power, like a final build, as you're leveling, but I believe it does offer up a lot of opportunity to get a lot of good experience. Now, realistically, that's the only positive thing I thought about this. I'm like, this is enjoyable if you are leveling up. I could see how this can come in handy. It's an alternative way to level up instead of just kind of blasting through hell tides all the way to the end and then seemingly getting to tier 1. However, if this is what the developers intend for us to play in the end game, I don't think this is it. I like to consider myself a casual player. I don't get to play as much as I'd like to, but that's because, I have a full-time job, a family. I have things going on in my life outside of Diablo 4, and I would like to consider myself a casual player. And I'd like to believe that there is room to balance this game for casual and blasters alike. But even though casuals and blasters will both experience this Escalating Nightmare Dungeons nonsense, I don't think this is going to be the end game that either the casual or the blaster audience wants to play. So just to reiterate here, if this is the leveling experience that they intend for us to play, then I think this is going to be awesome. But if this is what they expect us to play in the end game, this is absolutely going to flop. And now the reason I say that this is going to be an absolute flop, whether you're casual or you're a blaster, is simply because we've been playing Nightmare Dungeons for 9 seasons now. And essentially what you're giving us is the Greater Rift version of Nightmare Dungeons. Now, I don't want to just sit here and complain about Escalation Nightmare Dungeons. I feel like if you have critiques, the best thing you can do is really offer up solutions. And the first solution I'd like to offer up here for starters is I'd like to choose what Nightmare Dungeons and what Nightmare Dungeon sequence I go through once I do Nightmare Escalation Dungeons. Personally, I prefer the Nahantu Dungeons. I feel like they're a version of what Nightmare Dungeons need to look like in the future. Playing through these Escalating Nightmare Dungeons kind of reminds me of the Nightmare Dungeons of the past. I believe a lot of the tasks that you have to do in some of these dungeons are mundane, and they kind of keep you in this loop that you don't want to be in. Grab this, put this keystone here, or, free these prisoners, and then once you're done, the prisoners go to the end room. I don't think that's the fun stuff. I think the fun stuff is in the Nahantu dungeons. Those are way better, more well done. They also have those treasure rooms in it, which is awesome. That's what we're looking for here, right? Is loot. So I believe if they can kind of fine-tune the sequence of Nightmare Dungeons that you experience to be more like the Nahantu dungeons, I think we'll be on a better road to fun. Or at least let us choose what sequence we get to go through again. Like maybe I want to go from the dopamine tunnels into the Hoarfrost demise. Maybe that's what I want to do, Allow us to choose it. Maybe we can fine-tune these keys somehow. That'd be awesome. Now, the second solution I want to propose so that Nightmare Escalation Dungeons don't fall flat in the end game is allow us to create, collect, or maybe even find greater Nightmare Escalation Dungeon keys. And once we create a greater Nightmare Escalation Dungeon key, we get to choose what the loot drops is, or we get to choose what we're getting in this instead of it being so RNG. Like instead of it being Herodic Knowledge, maybe I want Herodic Greater Affix items in the end game, Maybe I want to be making more builds. Maybe I'm bricking all my items because Tempering's bricking my items. Maybe this is a good way to filter a solution for that. Or maybe I want a Herodic Gem Escalating Dungeon. Sometimes I feel as a casual player, this is not a good example because I'm on the PTR, but sometimes I don't have all the gem shards I need to make the grand version of the jewel. So maybe that'd be a cool way for me to fix and find the things I need. Maybe I need more scattered prisms. Allow us to get some control in that regard. Maybe it could just be crafting materials instead of just specifically scattered prisms. Or maybe it could be runes. I think what's happening here is essentially we're kind of doubling down on what the Undercity was trying to do. But I feel like this is definitely a lot more fun than the Undercity, if I'm being 100% honest. Or maybe we can go completely outside the box. Like maybe we can pick such a high tier difficulty of these greater Escalation Nightmare Dungeons that we're able to get an item that allows us to attach an additional greater affix to an item. Or maybe another item that allows us to fully masterwork a piece of armor. Now, something else they can add at the end of these escalating nightmare dungeons, I know I've said that 1,000 times, but maybe allow us to upgrade our glyphs instead of having to always go to the pit to do so. Now, I don't think that's going to draw people away from the pit, of course, because that's the only way we really have to measure the success and the strength of our builds right now is the pit. But giving us a different avenue in order to level up our glyphs will probably allow us to play these nightmare dungeons or these escalating nightmare dungeons a lot more. Or at least give us a reason to play it in the end game. Because I really strongly believe, and I'm going to say it again and again and again, that no one's going to want to play this in the end game if there's nothing to play for. If I want loot and Obnicide, I can go to Infernal Hordes. If I want a leveling experience and collect boss materials, you know, I can go to Helltide. Why am I playing Nightmare Dungeons or Escalating Nightmare Dungeons if that's the case? And what I'm really getting at here, and I'm going to make a separate video on it, is how do we make what we already have in Diablo 4 better? And I think on the topic of Nightmare Dungeons, Escalating Nightmare Dungeons is a step in the right direction. However, it falls short when it comes to the endgame. Why am I playing this? Why am I playing Nightmare Escalation Dungeons if it's just a sum of Nightmare Dungeons all slapped together? Now, the reason I'm playing this right now is, of course, I'm doing a video, you know, reviewing the Nightmare Escalation Dungeons as a casual player. But also, it is fun. It's fun to, you know, kill hordes of enemies and murk them and feel that kind of success. But at the end of the day, you know, it gets boring. There's a real question of, like, you know, why am I playing, you know? And the only other thing I can go do is make another character, and then that's the loot. But I believe the seasons, they don't last more than, I don't know, a week and a half at best. And then we have to wait, you know, 2.5 months more before the next season comes out. So I believe if the developers can get it together and potentially make the seasons, I don't know, last maybe double that, you know, maybe we might be, that might be a good tell that you're buffing the game in a direction that makes players want to play. Because truthfully, after a week and a half, most players aren't playing anymore because every build has been figured out. The you know, the maximum pit has been cleared. It's like, you know, as a casual player myself, I look at those videos and I think, okay, why am I playing? We've already hit the end game, you know. If anyone wants to know what the best build is, they can go on Mobalytics or they can go on max roll, and they could figure that out and just copy paste the build and, you know, la-di-da, you know. That's all good, but then, you know, why? I feel like that's why a lot of people stop playing too. You know, it's like we hit the end game very quickly. And the end game right now is that pit loop, and I'll say it over and over again. That's the only thing we have to measure the success of, you know, of the build and the class that we're playing, right? And that's not a bad thing. It's definitely good to have some sort of measuring stick when it comes to our builds, but we need more than that. I think going back to what I was trying to say before was we need to build on what we already have in Diablo 4. Which is, we have tons of activities, and this being one of the new ones, you know, we need to elaborate and expand on what makes them fun. But I'll save all that for a different video. Now, also, what I like about the Nightmare Escalation Dungeons here is that we get to go into this boss fight. And the boss fight's pretty cool. I can't imagine what this is going to be like at the beginning of the game. If we get this in the beginning of the game, I don't know if this is just simply intended to be, you know, you start getting the Escalating Nightmare Dungeon keys at the end of the game. But if that's the case, man, it's gonna fall, and it's gonna fall hard. It's not gonna be fun at all. I mean, being able to one-shot these bosses is one thing, but like, if we don't get to experience this until we're about this strong, then there's gonna be no point to really play, in my personal opinion. And let's look at the loot we get from this too. Oh yeah, and there's a bug, of course. If you stand too long, you get murked. I mean, the loot's decent, I'd have to say. You know, let's take a look at what we got here in terms of loot. I'm only gonna pick up the GA stuff at this point because that's where we're at. So in terms of loot, we definitely get a lot of legendaries. I believe we collected. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we have an 8th one here and a 9th. So we got about, okay, so 9 GA items. That's not bad. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. But again, remember, when we're leveling up, I'm trying to think of what the contrast would be in terms of what items are dropping when you're in lower tiers and lower difficulties. But even still, this isn't enough at the end of the day once you hit tier 4 and you're leveling up with your final build. As a casual player, again, this is a casual player's review on this. And I don't mean the loot. What I mean is, why did I just do that? You know, I can go farm this gear in other ways. I can go farm bosses. You know, why did I do this? And the only time I feel like that question of why gets answered is if I'm leveling up a character. It makes 100% sense to me is if I'm starting the game and we're able to jump straight into these escalating nightmare dungeons, that this is the way I'm allowed to level. That's awesome. I think this would be one of the best leveling experiences. You're basically jumping from dungeon to dungeon, loot's dropping, you get to fight a cool boss at the end. I think that's a cool loop till level 60. But once you hit level 60, then what? I'll tell you what it is. You're going to the pit. You're going to the pit to measure, you know, how strong am I, you know? How much damage can I do? That's the end game loop. I really want there to be more of an end game loop at the end of the game instead of just pushing the pit. So I hope there is some things they haven't revealed to us for season 9, but if this is the end all be all of the what they think is the end game, this ain't it, Blizzard. This ain't it. Now, before I end this video, there's another thing I want to talk about is regular nightmare dungeons and dungeons in general. So I like that they kind of offer the Horadric Gold Reserve and they offer these rewards. But at tier 1, or maybe even before in terms of difficulty, we need to have all these dungeons. Every single dungeon on this map should be a nightmare dungeon. Maybe we could start it like Penitent or Expert. I don't want to give it away too easy. I definitely want there to be some sort of grind and feel of leveling experience. But maybe at like Torment 1 or Penitent, we have the ability to just run nightmare dungeons and not have to collect keys to do so. Or maybe when we get to the nightmare dungeon, instead of having a stash tab full of these nightmare dungeon keys, there's like a Horadric altar that we get to choose what we want. You know, maybe we want gold. Maybe we want, you know, obols, whatever the case may be. Instead of giving us those keys, maybe just kind of have it ready at the nightmare dungeon for us. You know, make the game easier for us. I know everyone complains, oh, you want the game to play itself? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to say is allow it to be more accessible. For instance, we have boss lairs. We can now click on boss lairs, teleport to the boss lair, and fight the boss. Why can't we do the same for nightmare dungeons once we hit Penitent or Torment 1 difficulty? Stash space is one thing, but if we can't stack these nightmare key dungeons on top of each other, you know, what's the point? Maybe that's another way we can do it, is we could just have nightmare dungeon keys. They don't have to be anything specific, but you can use them once you get to the nightmare dungeon of your choice. And once you get to the nightmare dungeon of your choice, you can, you know, fix the options there. You can pick the difficulty. You can, you know, based on the difficulty, maybe you get better rewards. That's what I'm getting at, is maybe give us a little bit more control and a little bit more accessibility with these nightmare dungeons instead of kind of making it feel like a chore. And what you'd be able to do is simply just right click on the dungeon. And once you right click on the dungeon, you're able to teleport there. It'd also be a great way to help us gather Grim Favor, especially when the Grim Favor is on the nightmare dungeon. And once we get to the nightmare dungeon, we can offer up a Horadric nightmare dungeon key, and we can fix and attune the nightmare dungeon the way we see fit. Maybe even offer up some nightmare dungeons that allow us to re-roll our tempers every so often. I mean, that's a whole other video I can make on tempering, but it really sucks bricking an item, especially when you're trying to make a build. I think tempering is something that needs to be fixed, but that's a whole other conversation. Well, guys, that does it for me. After making this video and coming to the end of this video, I've had some thoughts, and I think I'm going to drop a video on an overall way to make the game better. And I think at the heart of the conversation I was trying to have with everyone today and in this video is that Diablo 4 has a lot of activities in it, but we don't need to make any more. We simply need to expand on the ideas that we already have. We need to elaborate on the activities that we have in Diablo 4 to do to make there feel like there's more of a sense of an end game. And with that being said, I'm definitely going to make another video. I have a ton of ideas that I wrote down that I haven't put in this video. Again, I just wanted to focus on the Nightmare Dungeon aspect of Diablo 4. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope this hits the right ears and the right eyes see this, man. I'm your boy Jadiro. Sign out for now. Peace.